So in my usual style of choices for wisdom talks here on the Tuesday and Thursday nights, I am working my way through a set of teachings which are like a sequence in Buddhism, working from quite mundane, workaday sort of values and virtues, and moving gradually towards those that are slightly more esoteric and transcendental. And because there are a total of 38 of these so-called blessings in the sequence, you can see that as we embark on number 17, then we are about halfway through. And for those who haven't been following all of the talks I've been giving, then we have already made our way through values and virtues which talk about standing on your own 2 feet financially, making sure your family or your close family is harmonious. And at this point in the blessings, we are starting to look at how we can give something back to society. And it's not something that is self-explanatory. There's always a certain sort of preparedness of mind or an attitude to the way that you help others in society, where you need to be fairly sort of savvy and level-headed in the way that you help others, in a way that's not going to make you feel that you regret it later. And the blessings that have come immediately before this one, about looking after extended family, have been dealing with generosity generally, just sort of sharing with others. Last time we looked at pure practice and practicing for purity, which means dealing with others in society in a way that upholds a sense of justice and fairness. And the reason for this is that if we are not careful in the way we help other people, then we may feel that we are drawn in more than we can afford to give. Or we might get tangled up with the wrong sort of people who are just a drain on our good nature or on our resources. And this is particularly the case when it comes to members of our family who are outside of our close family, who may be of a large number and may be of various sort of habits. So when you're dealing with a wider society, you can no longer be sure that you're not going to be taken for a ride by the people who, on the face of it, may be asking for your help. So this is a sort of complications that we're dealing with on the family front, which mean that it comes much later in the sequence of blessings than simply working towards having a harmonious family life. And some of the justification for that is that if those extended family members are slightly further out in your family tree, then the urgency in looking after all of them is a little bit less than for your immediate family. Secondly, to take all of your extended family on board may be a major outlay of time, energy, goodwill, and money. And if you do it in a clumsy way, then it may lead you down the road of things like favoritism or even nepotism, which will come back to bite you eventually. So this is why some caution is needed, some special sort of knowledge or special ways of disposing ourselves towards this sort of task of helping a wider society. So what is the difference between immediate, close family and our extended family? within Buddhism, and especially when it comes to helping others, then there's a sort of twofold division made between close family, who we have already seen in some of the previous blessings, to do with our parents, our spouse, our own children, and possibly our in-laws. And the optional part means that, well, you generally get to decide whether you marry them or have children. Yeah. As for all the rest, whether it be our aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, surprisingly also brothers and sisters, you might consider them to be your close family, but thinking about why they might have ended up on the list of extended family here, I think probably the reasoning is that often there can be sort of family infighting between brothers and sisters, especially when it comes to inheritance time, that can turn quite nasty. And therefore, the same sort of cautions that are suggested for extended family are also applicable to brothers and sisters as well, in the case that there is a conflict of interest. And of course, it's not just our blood relations here, but also trusted friends might be put on the list of our extended family as well, and also spiritual teachers. So they're in there too. They're part of your wider network, and maybe the ways in which you would want to help them would be not quite so unconditional as for members of your close family. So some of you might already realize who your extended family are. Maybe you've done your family tree already or whatever. But other people might feel that maybe they don't have an extended family, or they don't know their extended family, or do the people they know really count as an extended family at all? And there's a nice story which comes from the pioneering days of building our main temple in Thailand, where our Vice Abbot, the Venerable Tatachiwo, I have a board for him here. The Vice Abbot of our main temple in Thailand, he was leading a lot of the building work. And the building work in the temple in those days was done by a lot of volunteers mainly, or people who volunteered their time or their skills. And there was one young man on the volunteer team who helped out with a lot of the building work when the temple was being built. And once it had been built, once the concrete had been poured and the steel girders were in place, then there was a lot of surplus lumber or timber left over from which had been used as the scaffolding when the building were going up. And it was still quite good wood. And because that young volunteer had not yet set himself up in life, and he didn't have a house of his own, then the Vice Abbot said to him, "You can have this wood and go and build yourself your own house with it." But the young man felt that maybe this was more of a burden on him than maybe the Vice Abbot realized. Because although he appreciated being given a gift by the abbot, he confessed that if he had to do all the work on the house himself, then he would never finish it. And he didn't have enough money to hire a carpenter. So it would take him many months to complete. So the Vice Abbot asked him how many people he had in his family. And he said, well, he had a lot of people in his family because he is related to just about everyone in the village. So the Vice Abbot said, well, in that case, potentially you have a lot of people who can help you. But he said also that within a few days of starting to build his own house, he would know how many of those people were truly his extended family. Because he is related to a lot of them, but how many of them are actually worthy of the name of being his family. So he went around the whole village, calling in all the favors he thought he might have with all the members of his so-called family, and asked for people to chip in for the cost of maybe a carpenter, or chip in with helping him build his house. And it turned out that after making his rounds of the whole village, he was left with only 2 people who wanted to help him. And there were 2 people who he didn't expect at all. One of them was a stepbrother who lent him what he could of his money. And the only reason he did that was because when he first came to town, that boy's family let him stay before he had a place to stay for himself. And the other one was just a farmer from another province who had sympathy for him. So although he thought he was related or had extended family throughout the village, in the end it came down to just 2 people who actually stepped up to help him. And that, in terms of our definition of extended family, is probably how you find out who your family really is. Yeah? So it is important to help your extended family, as you can see from the story of the young man. And if people ask for help, then none of us really want to be the sort of person to turn a deaf ear to other people's in times of need. Sometimes we assume that we can be independent and stand on our own 2 feet in all circumstances, but sometimes if we're too young or too old to look after ourselves, then we need to rely on other people. If we're sick or if we're injured, then we need to reach out for help to others. Just as we need to do that for others, and others may need to do that for us too. Sometimes it's not long periods of time that we need other people's help. Sometimes it can be at special, particular times of transition in our lives that any extra help is much more appreciated than it normally would be. And if we're able to help or reach out to others at that times, then it can make a real difference to how it feels to be a part of a wider society. It makes the world a more peaceful place, and it means that people who we'd normally regard as strangers suddenly turn out to be our friends as well. So if we are thinking about our 4 bases of sympathy, which normally we've talked about in more unconditional terms, so being helpful to others, being generous to others, having endearing speech for others, and being consistent, inspiring trust in others. When it comes to members of extended family, all of these apply, but they may apply in a little bit more conditional sense than they would for our close or immediate family. So if it's helping with resources, it might mean that they might want to borrow something from us. It might be money, it might be equipment, or we might want to just give them that thing if it's surplus to our needs on occasion. If it is endearing speech, then sometimes this is not easy to do, especially if we need to turn someone away without helping them, but how to speak to them in a way that doesn't undermine any goodwill that possibly we had towards them before, then we need to be particularly careful in the things that we say towards them. For example, sometimes we don't realize how much they have helped us in the past. And if we now were to turn them away with nothing, it would, in their eyes, be seen as a very poor way of treating them. So, if at all possible, no matter what we remember of how they've helped us in the past, we need to help them on some level. And it might not be giving them, let's say, if it's money, not the full amount they've asked for, but at least something towards that, or maybe a connection by which they can get what they need, even if it's not from us, or even the bus fare to go to where they might have better luck finding what they need. Giving a helping hand, if it were our close family, generally we would help them out at every opportunity. If it's a member of our extended family, we would help them out when it's particularly important for them, at times of, let's say, transition or rites of passage in their life. Yeah? And being consistent in this respect might mean that we need to have magnanimity, treat them acceptingly, and not to slip up on our manners, for example, even if the things they're asking for are slightly annoying to us. Within Buddhism, this idea of having harmony or helpfulness towards others who are beyond our close family is seen as important, because sometimes if people are cohesive, they can overcome quite challenging situations which they couldn't normally do on their own or in much smaller groups. And there's one story given by the Buddha in something called the Vattaka, Jātaka, which is a story of birds. And during that particular lifetime, the Bodhisattva, or Buddha-to-be, actually was born as a quail. I think quails can fly, right? Maybe not very far or very fast, but they can fly. And there was a hunter who made his life's work to hunt down this flock of quails. And if the quails were ever fighting amongst themselves, then they would be a really easy target for the hunter. So he would settle down, he would imitate quail calls, and once they got close, then he'd throw his net over the whole flock. And generally, he would succeed in catching them every time. And the Bodhisattva, so the sort of Buddha-to-be quail, he suggested that if we all work together, actually, we could escape with the net. All we need to do is, whenever he throws his net over us, if we all fly up in the air at once, then we can actually carry the net away with us. So, for as long as they were harmonious in their little group, so like extended family, every net he threw over them, they all flew away with the net. So not only did the hunter get no quails for his dinner, he also lost his net every time as well. Until eventually, the only time he managed to catch any of them again was when they started squabbling amongst themselves. And they're all sort of flying up unsynchronized. They couldn't escape from the net. So this is the idea behind the sort of helping out your extended family. It may look like it's not a big deal, but it can help all the boats to rise on the tide, as it were. So special times when you might choose to help extended family, where in your close family you might help them out all the time, might be times of physical need, childhood, pregnancy, illness, old age. It might be in times of crisis that you might help them out, especially natural disaster, financial crisis, or it might be rites of passage in life. So a marriage, like, doesn't take long, right? Like marriage, like do, or whatever. Setting oneself up in life, a person might need a sort of a push in the right direction to get themselves set up in life with their own business or whatever. That might be a time when you would help them, when you might not help them at any other time. Or a time of a funeral, where there's always so many costs involved with funerals that if you can be there to contribute something in terms of help or in terms of donations, then generally that would be appreciated and seen as a time when it's particularly appreciated. For the monastic community, it is particularly the case that although none of the monks are really related to one another, but once they have all become monks together, it's like they're all in the same boat. Yeah? And there was a story from the time of the Buddha when there was a monk who managed to get severely sick. For the sake of argument, we'll call him Tissa. And he'd been a good meditator, but he started to go down with a sickness, which was quite unpleasant for his fellow monks. It was a disease where his skin had lots of open sores, which all stank. And because of how unpleasant his whole physical condition was, he had been abandoned by all his fellow monks who didn't want to come near him, basically. And the Buddha knew that this monk would soon pass away and also had the potential for enlightenment. And he knew that if no one took care of the monk, then the monk would die without having fulfilled his potential. So when he saw that all the other monks had abandoned this monk, he decided to set an example by proceeding to the fire shed, which is like a sort of sauna for treating, well, not just for hygiene, but also for treating fevers and so on. He fired up the fires in the fire shed close to where the monk was staying. And he personally boiled some water and went to where the monk was lying down and took hold of the edge of the couch or bed on which the monk was lying. And it was only then that all the other monks thought, oops, the Buddha is like making an example of us here, and they grabbed the other end of the bed. And because the monk could not walk anymore, they took the whole bed like a stretcher into the fire shed. And he stripped all the clothes off the monk, he washed the clothes, he bathed the monk before putting new dry clothes on the monk. And because the monk had been in the fire hut, he'd sweated out a lot of the toxins as well, and he could recover some sort of presence of mind. He wasn't going to get better, of course, but what the Buddha was trying to do was to make him comfortable so that in order to have sort of a good palliative care. And once the monk was feeling more comfortable, more receptive to what the Buddha had to teach, the Buddha instructed him that the body, when devoid of life, would soon be as useless as a log laid down on the ground. So it may sound like not very sort of encouraging, but it's like telling it as it is, as it were, for the monk to sort of prepare himself. And at the conclusion of the teaching, the monk Tissa passed away, but he managed to attain enlightenment before he did so, from being able to let go of his sort of mortal coil, as it were. And then the Buddha directed the monks to cremate his body because he'd become enlightened before he died. Then they collected also the relics and made a stupa out of them, a pagoda. And subsequently, the Buddha taught to his monks, having taken ordination, you have no relatives anymore to whom you can turn. You have no mother or father who are going to come running when you're sick. You have no brothers or sisters who can help you out. So if you fail to look after each other, then who will be there to look after you? So he said, from now on, if any monks among you get sick, regard looking after those monks as great a merit as if you were looking after me personally. So from that time on, monks have been a lot more astute about looking out for each other and looking out for the health of one another. But it's a principle which applies more widely in society. If you think about when the usual things we rely upon break down, then we rely on our neighbours, we rely on our extended family for all of these things. If we're not receiving from our extended family, then we ought to be giving and regard ourselves as part of that safety network for others in society who share our sense of humanity. So if you are new to meditation today and enjoyed it, found it was positive for you, I would encourage you to meditate further, especially if you're new to meditation. And generally what I recommend is that people try to meditate once a day at home, maybe starting out with 20 minutes of meditation at a time of the day which is convenient for you, and also a time of the day when you feel enough energy to be able to sit for meditation fruitfully, and maybe a time of the day when you're not going to be interrupted by disturbances of various sorts. So it might be first thing in the morning if you're a morning sort of person, might be last thing at night, especially if you're meditating to overcome insomnia. Some people who have stressful jobs even sit in their car and meditate in their lunch break. So as long as it's 20 minutes, then that's a good length of time to start out with. If you can remember the meditation technique which you heard today, then that's all well and good. You can just sort of practice and repeat. But if you are a little bit hazy on meditation technique, or if you'd like to hear a variety of different approaches to the center of the body, which are advocated in our meditation tradition, then you might like to try out the free Mind Gym app, which you can download onto your smartphone and listen to various audio tracks. There are more than 100 now of various lengths, and you can also time the length of your meditation on that as well. Generally, however enthusiastic you are when you start out in meditation, the enthusiasm will probably only last 7 days at best. And for that reason, we encourage people to come along for our weekly classes on a Tuesday or a Thursday evening to top up their inspiration by meditating together as a group, and maybe to bring along any questions they have from their practice as well to ask the monk. So Tuesday evenings are usually a little bit shorter meditation, Thursday evenings a little bit longer than that. Also, if you find it more convenient to meditate from home, there's also a Saturday Zoom meditation which lasts 1 hour between 7 and 8 p.m, which you can meditate along with, and you get a wisdom talk and a meditation as part of that. Thursday in a couple of weeks' time, we usually have a special event for the full moon. Usually a little bit longer meditation, generally involves lighting candles of some sort. Seem to have a lot of candles, as you can see, especially this time of the year in our temple. So I'm sure the candle lighting will have something to do with those, between 7 and 8:30 p.m. It'll also be transmitted on Zoom for those who aren't able to attend in person. And I'd also like to give a heads up for anyone who is a fan of thelastminute.com for the meditation retreat coming up this weekend, where we're taking the keen meditators down to Somerset for meditation for Friday night, Saturday, and finishing up on Sunday afternoon. So ask our volunteers for anyone who hasn't signed up for that but who is interested. Also, the details are found on the website www.themeditationsurrey.com.